Welcome to Food for Thought, now in its 18th year. Thank you for listening if you're new. Thank you for listening if you've been listening for years. Today's episode is Valentine's Day, a love story written by birds. What does that mean? So mysterious. My name is Colleen Patrick-Goudreau. You can find me at joyfulvegan.com. If you'd like to join our incredible community and get perks and personal connection, you can go to patreon.com/Colleen Patrick-Goudreau to become a supporting member at your chosen level. You can also get there by going to joyfulvegan.com. Everything is at joyfulvegan.com, including the link to pre-order a copy of my new book, A Year of Compassion, 52 Weeks of Living Zero Waste, Plant-Based, and Cruelty-Free. And related to that, you can get free tickets to the book launch celebration if you're in the San Francisco Bay Area. Related to that, you can also find anything. I have a conference coming up, an online conference called Compassion in Action, Cultivating Joy and Hope in Difficult Times. I have one-on-one sessions. I have on-demand cooking classes. I have recipe ebooks, including a new one for Valentine's Day. I'm calling it Recipes for Romance because, of course, the recipes and romance can be celebrated any time of the year. But if you are looking for something specifically for Valentine's Day, I chose the recipes specifically for this holiday, for decadent, intimate dining is what I'm calling it. So you can go check that out at joyfulvegan.com. Everything's over there. And thanks so much. Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing fabulously well, and happy Valentine's Day. I know I'm not supposed to say that. I'm supposed to roll my eyes and sigh and declare that Valentine's Day is just a made-up holiday designed to fuel consumerism, as if all holidays weren't at some point made up. But that's beside the point. The point is, love is older than capitalism. And I'll say this if no one else will. There are worse things in the world than celebrating love. Love in all its forms. Romantic love, platonic love, self-love, love for animals, love for the earth, love for chocolate, definitely love for chocolate. So whether you are in a grand love affair, a new love affair, a steady love affair, or you're happily single, or you're just here for the history lesson, which I'm going to give you today, happy Valentine's Day. And if that offends your anti-commercialist sensibilities, then feel free to consider this an ornithological observance instead. I'll get to that because it's kind of amazing. Obviously, doing the work that I do and the things that I care about, I'm always looking for connections with other animals in our language, in our expressions, in our history. And that is no different today. So I can't wait to share with you how the romance side of this holiday has to do with birds. I know I'm spoiling it but I said ornithological, so you must know that has to do with birds. So I will get there. I just celebrated the 30th anniversary of the first date with my husband. So you are not going to find me cynical about love at all. And guess what? There is no reason to be cynical because Valentine's Day was not invented by Hallmark to manipulate us into buying overpriced greeting cards. You don't have to go buy overpriced greeting cards, but that's not why we have this holiday. The history of this holiday and its association with romance is far more interesting, far more poetic, and can you believe it? Related to animals. Of course you can believe it. If there's something like that somewhere on the interwebs, you know it's going to be me talking about that. So today we're going to talk about, number one, why Valentine's Day is associated with romance, what animals have to do with the history of Valentine's Day, why Valentine's Day is celebrated on February 14th, who Saint Valentine was, and why his name is forever associated with Valentine's Day, with romance, and with February 14th. So why is Valentine's Day associated with romance? The answer is birds. So long before Valentine's Day became a celebration of chocolates and roses and romantic gestures. It was tied to the natural world, specifically birds. In medieval Europe, people believed that mid-February marked the beginning of the bird mating season, probably because that's what they saw. Depending on where they were in medieval Europe, of course, the climate is different depending on where you are. But generally, people believe that mid-February marked the beginning of the bird mating season, and this idea is beautifully captured in a 14th century poem by one of my favorite writers, Geoffrey Chaucer, and his poem was Parliament of Fowls. Now, fowls refers to birds, so Parliament of Birds, if you will. So here's the synopsis of the poem. The narrator of the poem falls asleep while reading about love and destiny and dreams of entering a beautiful garden where nature, Lady Nature, so nature with a capital N, personified, where Lady Nature presides over a gathering of birds, and the birds have come together on St. Valentine's Day, wait for it, to choose their mates. 3 noble eagles compete for the love of a single female eagle, each making their case to why they should be chosen. And the female eagle, in the end, refuses to choose immediately, asserting her right to decide in her own time, she says. This is in modern English. Obviously, Chaucer wrote in Middle English, he wouldn't have called Middle English at the time, but we call Middle English. But the modern English translation, I choose not yet to love. I will remain free. Love must be given willingly, and no one shall command my heart. Well done. So meanwhile, the other birds, representing different social classes, which was also a common theme in Chaucer's writings and writings of a lot of medieval poets, they argue, they gossip, they mock each other, and they create a humorous and lively debate on love and matchmaking and societal expectations. In the end, no final decision is made about who will pair with who, and the birds fly off to sing and celebrate. The dreamer wakes up, and he's left pondering the nature of love and choice. And I said that this was all happening on Valentine's Day. How do we know it's happening on Valentine's Day? Because Chaucer explicitly refers to it in the opening lines, where he describes the day when birds choose their mates. Again, in modern English, for this was on St. Valentine's Day, when every bird comes there to choose his mate. Now, Chaucer did not specifically refer to Valentine's Day as February 14th, and we're going to come back to why this date is associated with Valentine's Day, why February 14th and Valentine's Day are forever linked. But he was alluding to a time in early spring when birds begin to choose their mates. In the Middle Ages, February was regarded as the month when spring began. And so I really encourage you to go read that poem. It's a beautiful, beautiful romantic poem. If you don't read poetry, try it. And if you don't read love poetry, this is the time, this is the day, this is the weekend to do it. Just sit down and read a poem to yourself, to your loved one, to whomever. There's so much good poetry out there. Write a poem. Try writing a poem. What a beautiful gift to give to anyone you love. And if you are interested, you can go find Parliament of Fowls anywhere online. Definitely read it if you can in Middle English, or maybe go listen on YouTube to someone reading it in Middle English. Middle English is beautiful. And Geoffrey Chaucer's writing is just so clever and full of imagery and romance, quite literally. And he was just such an amazing poet, and he was such an amazing person with an incredible life. And I really recommend checking him out if you haven't checked out Chaucer. Now, just to kind of set this in its time, the Parliament of Fowls was most likely written between 1380 and 1382. Canterbury Tales, which of course is his most famous piece, his most famous work, was written sometime between 1387 and 1400. So 1380s is when the Parliament of Fowls was written. And this imagery in the Parliament of Fowls resonated so deeply that over time, people began associating this holiday, this time of year, February, with romance. And this is apparent because we also have what is considered the earliest surviving Valentine, and that is from 1415, so not very long after Chaucer wrote Parliament of Fowls. And it is considered the earliest surviving Valentine, and it's a poem written by Charles, Duke of Orleans. And one of the lines, and I'm not going to read it in Middle French, but one of the lines, the translation is, "I am already wearied by love, my very sweet Valentine." And so Charles, Duke of Orleans, wrote his now famous Valentine poem to his wife in 1415 from the Tower of London, where he was imprisoned. And so, yeah, that just kind of adds a bit more gravitas to this love letter. And it is considered the first Valentine. It's certainly the first one we have and have preserved. Now, obviously, it was very personal, this poor man. Now we all can see his letter to his wife. But this sentiment, this idea of considering someone your Valentine, reflected a growing tradition, and it's one that would evolve over the centuries. So that's the 1415, so very early 15th century. So now we'll move on to the 15th, 16th centuries in England and France, where you have Valentine's Day becoming more than just a day tied to bird mating season. It is now celebrated as a day for human lovers as well. And so you have poets like John Lydgate, and you have William Shakespeare referencing this holiday, solidifying its connection to romantic love. At the time, still, however, in the 15th century, in the 16th century, it was still a noble or aristocratic tradition rather than a widespread holiday celebrated by the masses. But Shakespeare references Valentine's Day in Hamlet, which was written in 1600, showing that by this time, the idea of February 14th as a day of romance was now well known in English culture. Tomorrow is St. Valentine's Day, all in the morning betime, and I, a maid at your window, to be your Valentine. I mean, I don't know how much more explicit you can get than that. So, so now we have this tradition moving into the general public, because remember, that was one of the things that was so incredible about Shakespeare and his time and the theater is ordinary people would have access to these ideas, these concepts, these holidays. And so what started happening was in England and in Scotland especially, you have lovers exchanging handwritten notes and small keepsakes. And this tradition spreads now to ordinary people, to the masses, rather than remaining confined to courts and castles. In Scotland, the Valentine's Day lottery became a popular custom. So names were drawn from a hat, pairing men and women as Valentines for the day. This is in the 17th century. And of course, that led to all sorts of mayhem. There's actually a lot of really weird, interesting games that were played, especially in Victorian times, at Valentine's Day parties. That was kind of a really big thing in Victorian era. I'm not getting into those games. They were weird. They were strange, and you can look them up online. Maybe you play them at home. I don't know. But now what we have is Valentine's Day moving into a celebration among, kind of the general population. So for hundreds of years, Valentine's Day was celebrated through these handwritten love letters and small tokens. So from the 1400s through the 1600s, lovers expressed their affections through carefully crafted poems, notes, keepsakes. That's something we still do today. But by the 1700s, the tradition began to shift. As literacy rates improved and printing became more accessible, good thing, the first commercially printed Valentine's messages appeared in England. And so you might go, oh yeah, well that was just the end of the world then, right? Because commercial printing, commercial printing actually led to a lot of really good things. And of course it leads to things that can make people cynical. And so with commercial printing, We have small booklets of love poems that people could copy out into their own handmade cards. Some were woodcut, some were engraved prints, and they would feature romantic imagery. They would feature birds. They would feature, lovebirds, quite literally, mating birds. I mean, probably not shown actually mating, but birds picking their mates. And all of these, probably pretty sappy verses helping people to write their love letters. They couldn't find their own words. Nothing wrong with sappy verses. If that's what you're writing, go for it. And so what we now have is this tradition happening, but things were about to change. Things were about to change. And again, it really has to do with the democratization of a particular service, and that is the penny post. So, printing becomes a tool, a technology for democratizing ideas. And the penny post is now a tool for democratizing the exchange of ideas, in this case, love notes. And so in 1840, the British postal system introduced the penny post, which allowed people to send letters cheaply and anonymously. And this was a game changer for Valentine's Day. So previously, sending a letter could be really expensive, meaning that only the wealthy could afford to exchange love notes. But with the introduction of affordable postage, anyone could send a Valentine's card, anyone at all. And so the idea of sending a secret Valentine, especially secret, became very popular, especially in Victorian England, where propriety often limited open expressions of affection. But with a simple stamp, a simple penny stamp, a shy admirer could confess their love, and the recipient would be left guessing who had sent it. I don't know, that's reminding me a bit of Valentine's Day in grammar school, which was an absolute nightmare. Like, people exchange Valentines. I am so curious to know, if you have children, if that is still being done. It was the most stressful day to go to school, I think. Maybe next to photo day was the most stressful day, because what if you got no Valentines? That is the most horrific thing. And what if, it was just the most horrific thing. And sometimes you would get anonymous Valentines. In this case, just kind of maybe showing up on your desk or in your desk. Remember those desks that have drawers? Those were the days. So those were the days when I was growing up. But that's the idea, is that you could just give a Valentine to anyone. And so as a result, Valentine's Day card giving skyrocketed, setting the stage for mass production. And that was going to change things even more. So we'll get to that. But speaking of love letters, I wanted to share with you that I'm back on YouTube. I'm receding a bit from Instagram and Facebook. And it's not for some principled, stand, whatever. You can take a principled stand. It's really not for that. Sorry. But it's just been a really frustrating experience for a number of different reasons I will not bore you with. But one of the things that occurred to me was that long form content is what I value, if you can't tell. Here I am doing this podcast 18 years in and not feeling frustrated by my podcast. Haven't ever felt frustrated by my podcast, but this short form content that is kind of dictated by the platforms like Instagram, Facebook, Threads, all of them, all of those kind of similar ones. That's, I think, one of the things that led me to feel pretty frustrated and unsatisfied over on Instagram and Facebook. And I'm not making some grand declaration. I'm still over there. I'm still posting some things. I'll still kind of repost some things, but I kind of hopped back on YouTube, kind of declaring that I'm returning to YouTube with a spontaneous live video. And I have been welcomed back with so much encouragement and kindness that it has been incredibly meaningful to me. So thank you to everyone who hopped on the live, or you can see the video. It's up there on my YouTube channel. You can just see it and comment on it and ask me any questions you have for future videos. It really just meant a lot. It was just really lovely. And a lot of people shared that, they started listening to my podcast 10 years ago or 15 years ago or 8 years ago, and they became vegan, and thank you so much. And all the things that just make my little heart go thumpity thump. So on Valentine's Day, I want to thank you for that. It really made me feel quite loved. So thank you. And if you are inclined toward my long form content and want to see me and not just hear me, check out my YouTube channel and please subscribe if you feel moved to, because I am going to be building that community over there once again. And of course, I also want to thank Plain Products, our sponsor today, supplementing our listener supporters over at Patreon. So please, you can join our Patreon supporters. But just as birds build their nests with care, choosing materials that are sustainable and protective. See what I did there? See what I did there? Plain Products does that. They're like birds, building their nests with materials that are reusable and sustainable and protective. And that's what Plain Products does with their line of refillable, zero waste, vegan, cruelty-free hair and body care products so that you can care for yourself without leaving behind a trail of plastic waste. You can care for yourself while caring for the earth and, of course, by virtue of that, caring for the animals. So in all seriousness, they are my favorite hair product company and all the things. I use them for all the things. People ask me a lot about my skincare. I really don't do anything with my skin other than wash it with water. And I use Plain Products face lotion. I use their body lotion. I really love everything they make, but I'm going to be really serious for a minute. Their cherry almond deep conditioner is kind of heaven and a game changer. Thank you, Plain Products, for coming out with this product. It smells amazing. It smells for hours and hours. My hair smells amazing. And it provides the kind of moisture I need for my unruly head of hair, which I talked about in the hair loss episode. So the regular conditioner is fantastic as well. But check out their cherry almond deep conditioner. And here is a gift worth chirping about. Okay, I'll stop with the bird references. So here's the thing. For years, you would have seen on my website, because I've been an affiliate of Plain Products for many years, that when you use a particular link and a particular code, you get 15% off. No more. You don't get 15% off anymore using the code. You get 20% off. You're welcome. And thank you, Plain Products. So the other thing is I realized, and I've written to Plain Products, I think I have said the wrong code for you for that discount code. So I'm asking them if they could please include Joyful Vegan as the discount code, because the discount code for Plain Products has been compassion forever. And I said, I think Joyful Vegan because it's my brand and because it's also my discount code for Compliment supplements. So sorry about that. So if you did try and go over using my link and you put in Joyful Vegan and it didn't work, I'm so sorry. That was my fault. Use Compassion as the coupon code and get 20% off. But if you used Joyful Vegan, I'm hoping that they'll be able to at least switch that for people who listen to that podcast or see that reference in other places that I cannot change. So go to joyfulvegan.com. On the homepage, on the page for today's episode, you will find the link to Plain Products. And in order for me to get my little baby affiliate cut, you have to use that link. And in order for you to get 20% off, you have to use the code COMPASSION. So thank you so much, Plain Products, and go check out their amazing products. And thank you to all of our listener supporters, and a huge shout out to my heroes and my angels, Angelica Torres Lofton, Karma Whitford, Rachel Lovell, Jennifer Statmiller, PJ Schuster, Tina Atwell, Ranjini Mohan, Risa Rybakov, and Brooke Boussard. And yes, these are the same names you've been hearing again and again. If you'd like to join them in the hero and angel status, you can go over to patreon.com/Colleen Patrick-Goudreau. And now back to the fascinating history behind Valentine's Day. So before we took our sponsor break, we were talking about how the penny post made it possible for the masses to get in on the Valentine's Day love letter action. So by the time Esther Howland, who entered the picture in 1849, the Valentine's Day tradition was already thriving, but she took it to an entirely new level. Known as the mother of the American Valentine, Howland saw an opportunity. She was inspired by the lace covered, really elaborate Victorian Valentines, and you can find them anywhere on the internet to see how just intricately designed they were. I won't say gaudy, but they're quite intricately designed. They were so popular in England, and she was inspired. She was from the United States, and she began designing and selling her own in the United States. And her cards were also intricate and decorative, filled with lace and flowers and embossed details and, yes, birds. And they were a huge success. And so within a few years, Valentine's Day had shifted from a deeply personal, handwritten exchange, still with weird games, to a mass-marketed, store-bought tradition. So now you have the 19th century where people were buying cards in stores. But there was still more to come. Fast forward to the 1900s when a young entrepreneur named J.C. Hall, get it? Started a small greeting card company in Kansas City, Missouri. And by 1910, his company, soon to be known as Hallmark, began printing Valentine's Day cards on a massive scale. 1910. With the rise of department stores and advertising and the consumer economy and the consumer push, no doubt there was consumerism then as there is now. Valentine's Day transformed into a full-blown commercial holiday. Now it was no longer just about love letters. It became about chocolates and flowers and jewelry. And even, I'm remembering these Hallmark figurines and stuffed animals and balloons and all of these extravagant gestures and unnecessary things. But that is now what Valentine's Day is. And that really kind of took off in 1910 with J.C. Hall. So by the 1950s, Hallmark and other greeting card companies figured out, okay, this is a pretty good marketing opportunity. And they cemented Valentine's Day as a cultural and economic powerhouse. Then you have romantic movies and advertisements and reinforcing the idea that love should be expressed through teddy bears. And soon, Valentine's Day was no longer just about celebrating love. It was also about spending money to prove it. Now, just teddy bears, obviously diamonds and rings and jewelry and like all the things. And so here we are today, where over 145 million Valentine's Day cards are exchanged every year, making it the second largest card giving holiday after Christmas. Exactly. Now, I had talked in the past in my Meaningful Life episodes, I love getting cards in the mail. I love getting letters in the mail. I love getting notes. I've recently, my mother used to send notes. My mother used to send cards all the time. I have a box of notes and cards from my mother, which was incredibly, incredibly sweet. Sometimes they're emotional. And my mother's boyfriend recently found one of her notes in his drawer because she lived with him before she died, and he sent me a picture of it just very unexpectedly. I was writing, and this picture of her note from beyond the grave appeared on a message from him, and it was quite just emotional, getting emotional talking about it, and it just reminded me how much she used to do this and how special it is. And I will tell you that something I have been doing for the last several years is sending friends birthday cards, physical birthday cards, and physical thank you cards when they have us over for dinner, when they treat us to dinner, or what have you, or just saying hello. There was one year that I actually sent Valentine's Day cards to all of my girlfriends to thank them for being my friend and for I named the things about them that I really value and love. And so I don't have this kind of cynicism around Valentine's Day. And if there's an opportunity to show someone you love them or tell someone you love them, take it any day. But why not use this as a jumping off point? However, when we're talking about cards and waste and trees and all that, there are definitely ways to do this in a zero waste way, in a sustainable way. I do want to direct you over to joyfulvegan.com. I'm sure there's a million blog posts out there on the internet, but I have like a short little blog about how, zero waste, cruelty-free vegan gifts for Valentine's Day. Now, I know that when you're hearing this, it will be Valentine's Day already, but I am recording this in 2025. I know it's a whole weekend. So I know you'll have an entire weekend of possible Valentine's Day. And the things I'm recommending are not things that you have to go order and it's going to take, weeks to get to you. So you can implement the suggestions I have on the day, including recipes, and again, including my recipe bundle, the recipe ebook called Recipes for Romance. You can get that, buying tea, buying chocolates in a tin, just lots of ideas. And when it comes to cards, it could just be, I'm going to guess that you have cards sitting around, blank cards, thank you cards. A thank you card can be a Valentine's Day card, okay? You probably have paper sitting around. You might have a marker sitting around. Make your own card. Fine. Send it, give it, put it in the mail, put it in someone's mailbox, put it in your, put it under your lover's pillow. I don't care. But use the cards you have. That was one thing I realized when I was kind of starting my zero waste journey was, as I've identified it as being about valuing things, use what you have. And so now I have a lot of cards still and I'm using them up. The cards I have bought are from Etsy. They're, on recycled paper, and they're a box of birthday cards because I really like having a box of cards. So on my calendar, I have my friend's birthday show up 5 days before their birthday to remind me to fill out, to write out a card to them and to send it. And it gives me time to get it into the mail. So the point is, you can be sustainable and still exchange Valentine's Day cards or any kind of cards. I will say, be wary of the cards that have a lot of glitter and that aren't recyclable. I would stick with really simple paper, especially paper that has been recycled. And again, go to Buy Nothing. People are giving things away all the time on FreeCycle and Buy Nothing. You could probably get cards there. They're already in the world. Go get them. Just bring them home, keep them in a drawer and use them. So all that's to say is I still think it's very special to exchange cards, but it can be done in a sustainable way. Okay, let me step off my soapbox. Okay, I'm sitting down again. Okay, before we close, let's talk about who this Saint Valentine was. Who's this Valentine person, right? How did a saint named Valentine get tangled up in all of this love and this romance? Okay, we don't know, but I'll tell you what the apocryphal stories are. I'm sure they're apocryphal because whenever they're like really cute stories, I've told you this about etymology. When we don't know when we don't know for certain what the etymology of a word is, and you hear a really adorable, probably hard to believe story, I'm going to tell you that don't believe it, but it's still a nice story. But in terms of truth, it probably doesn't hold water. So one of the most enduring stories about Saint Valentine claims that he was a Roman priest during the reign of Emperor Claudius II, in the 3rd century. Of course, you have Claudius from the 1st century. Claudius in the 3rd century supposedly believed that single men made better soldiers, and he banned young men from marrying. I actually didn't check to see if that was true, but apparently that was the case. And Valentine was a Roman priest during the reign of Claudius II. And Valentine believed this was not just. And so he secretly performed weddings for young couples. I'm thinking of Romeo and Juliet and that wonderful friar who married them secretly. But so apparently Valentine secretly performed weddings. And when Claudius found out, Valentine was arrested and sentenced to death. And while he was in prison, Valentine fell in love with the jailer's daughter and sent her a farewell note signed from your Valentine before his execution on February 14th. A little too neat. This is just a little too neat. Around 269 in the Common Era. So this is 269 AD. So that phrase has stuck around for centuries. I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it at all. Another version suggests that this Valentine fella wasn't just about romance, that he was known for helping persecuted Christians and even healing the blind daughter of his jailer before he was executed. And so these legends paint Valentine as this heroic, self-sacrificing martyr. But the truth is, we don't know. We know very little about him. There were actually multiple Christian martyrs named Valentine, so that makes it a bit more difficult. And the historical record is just too vague. So we cannot confirm any of these stories. And so we don't know. We just don't know. What we do know is this. There was a Valentine. There was a Saint Valentine. We just don't know why he's associated with Valentine's Day. But we do know that in 496, so in the 5th century AD, again, Common Era CE, Pope Gelasius I established February 14th as the feast of Saint Valentine. And so he was honoring one or more, which one of these martyrs we don't know, but he was honoring one of these early martyrs in the Christian church. And so he made February 14th, the feast of Saint Valentine. So in the Christian tradition, a feast day is a designated day in the liturgical calendar, liturgical meaning the church calendar, set aside to commemorate a saint's life and deeds, often marked by special prayers and church services, and in some cases, celebrations. At the time, this feast had no connection to romance, no connection to love. Again, this is 496. It was just a religious observance in honor of Saint Valentine's martyrdom. So that's how it got associated. That's how the day, February 14th, got linked with this martyr, Saint Valentine. We just don't know why it eventually became Valentine was associated with romance. Now, you might hear there is kind of an urban myth. I don't know if urban is the right word. There's a myth that Valentine's Day evolved from Lupercalia, which was a Roman fertility festival held on February 15th, where men whipped women with animal hides to encourage fertility. Not exactly romantic, but Lupercalia was a pagan celebration of fertility, that's true, but there is no evidence at all that Pope Gelasius deliberately replaced it with St. Valentine's feast day to impose a Christian feast day onto a Roman holiday, a Roman celebration of fertility. We just don't have any evidence of that. The real link between February 14th and romantic love would not emerge for another 800 years, and it had nothing to do with saints or ancient Roman traditions. It had everything to do with birds and Geoffrey Chaucer, who made that connection. So that's what we know, is that for centuries, St. Valentine was just honored as a martyr, not as a matchmaker. And in the 1300s, poets like Geoffrey Chaucer began linking that day, linking St. Valentine to romance, likely because of the medieval belief that birds began mating in mid-February, so it fell around the same time. And that's what we know for sure. What began as a simple day of bird-inspired poetry and courtly love has become a multi-billion-dollar industry. But despite the commercialization, Valentine's Day is still about one thing it should be, and that is about expressing love. And there is nothing wrong with that. So whether it is a handwritten note that you give to someone, or just an exchange of words, or a box of dairy-free chocolate, or even if you want to give a card that you buy in the store, it's about connection and it's about love. And the birds know that. The birds have inspired that. And here we are once again in a place where animals inspire human tradition. The birds are still doing their thing. The birds have no idea that their ancient rituals have helped shape a human tradition. We can look to nature today as Chaucer did in the 1300s, as people did thousands of years ago. We look to nature for inspiration. That's certainly where I get my inspiration from. And I get my inspiration from all of you. Thank you so much for still being here 18 years later. Thank you to everyone who supports this podcast, enables me to keep going. And thanks again to Plain Products for their zero waste, vegan, cruelty-free hair care, body care, skin care, all the things to keep waste out of landfills. I highly encourage you to check them out. At joyfulvegan.com, you can find their link and use compassion for 20% off for the animals, for the birds, for the non-human animals. This is Colleen Patrick-Goudreau. Thanks for listening and happy Valentine's Day.